Every 2 years, the World Rimfire and Air Rifle Benchrest Federation holds a World Cup or World Championship competition with all the top shooters from all over the globe traveling across oceans and continents to see who's the best of the best. This year, the event is being held in my home country of South Africa, which gives me the opportunity to travel out for a few days and check it out. There were over 150 shooters in attendance from 14 different countries, and this brought a whole new sense of patriotism to the event that I'd not experienced before. I've shot in plenty of 100-yard and 50-meter bench race competitions before, as well as other disciplines, but I'd never experienced the excitement of different countries going up against each other. It was awesome. I arrived on the first practice day before the event officially started, and this gave me some insight into what a typical preparation day looked like. Now, an extra practice day isn't going to make you a better shooter, but it does give you insight into what the wind might do. And I know from experience that every range is different. The conditions for the next few days would be incredibly challenging. Even some of the local guys said they had never seen wind like this before, so everyone wanted to get in some range time to get a feel for what their pellets might do. It was cool to see shooters from places I'd never expect, like Iran and the Philippines, and even more humbling was to be recognized and greeted by name by people who could hardly speak a word of English. The style of shooting that I'm used to may be very different to what they're used to, but at the end of the day, the love for the sport is the same, and we had plenty to talk about. It was an awesome introduction to the world of competitive 25-meter bench rest, which left me very excited for the days to follow. But as the day drew to an end, everyone started heading back to the lodge. My home for the next couple of days would be a place called Zebra Lodge, and what's cool is that the WRABF basically booked out the entire place, which allowed all the shooters to stay together and get to know each other, and made transport by shuttle bus to and from the range really easy. I had the Finns and the Russians staying in my section of the lodge, but while most of them planned to spend the evening relaxing and having dinner together, I had other plans. I had been invited to attend the Colours Evening, where the South African Precision Sport Shooting Federation would award the country's top shooters with national and federation colours. South Africa has a history of producing very, very strong shooting teams across many disciplines, and probably the best 25-meter team in the world. So earning national colours is not something that is taken lightly. You basically have to shoot 99% of the top shooters' score to even be considered. And so every one of these guys and ladies deserved to be here. It was a special thing to witness. So I got some good rest last night, had a really awesome time at the Colours Evening, where the South African shooters got their Protea colours, and then had a really good sleep at the hotel, some good rest. I'm going to head down now to the bottom at the lodge here to have some breakfast, and then the bus is going to take all of the shooters who are staying here down to the range so they can get some practice in. So looking forward to it. I'm going to bring my cameras and my drone with, get some footage of the practice for you guys, and hopefully enjoy it. At the breakfast venue, there was a distinct sense of national pride as everyone showed up in their team tracksuits, flags hung all around, and everyone discussing the day's shooting. At the range, the wind was just as tricky as the first day, and even more shooters had arrived, so the range was constantly full. There are two divisions for air rifle: light varmint, which is sub 12 foot-pound, and heavy varmint, which is sub 20 foot-pound. So people had to set up numerous rifles, particularly those who were also shooting the Rimfire divisions as well, who had another 2 rifles to set up. And I didn't get much footage of the Rimfires, unfortunately. I was very much focused on the air guns, particularly because the setups were very different to what I was used to. In the 100-yard Benchrest circuit, which I'm used to, the top rifles for the job are mostly FXs with some day states and raws thrown in, but 25 meters completely different, with Walther, Feinwerk Bau, Steyr, Thomas and Raw being the top brands and not a single FX or day state in sight. The strategy is completely different as well, but I'll talk about that later. The opening ceremony had a distinctly African feel to it, which was awesome. The tourists seemed to enjoy the Ndebele music, the artwork on the building, and the traditional meat dishes that were served at the table. At dinner time, there were a few speeches made and the event was officially declared open. I got to speak a little bit about the world of 100-yard Benchrest, my experience of 25 meter, and how we should all be open to learning from each other, because there's constant development happening across all disciplines that we can all benefit from, and at the end of the day, we all share the same passion. The competition itself is pretty much spread over 2 weeks, a week for air rifle and a week for rimfire. As mentioned before, I didn't get to cover much of the rimfire. I was actually supposed to shoot in the air rifle divisions, but I had to head home early for a wedding, so I only stayed for the first day of competition. Nevertheless, I got a really good feel for the sport, and this is what I learned. Number 1, you can't move from 25 to 100 or vice versa and just expect to do well. The strategies are completely different. 25 meter, the wind applies forces to the pellet along its trajectory, and the combination of these forces added together results in movement. A good 25 meter shooter will be able to read his flags, understand the wind vectors, and hold accordingly. 100 yard is totally different in that the wind changes so many times between the shooter and the target that trying to predict the wind is almost pointless. If anything, wind flags might be used to give a rough indication of how consistent the wind is, but most of the information you'll need will be gained from the sighters. Sighters give you the only reliable feedback, and the shooter has to be able to read and understand the conditions based purely on the sighters, pick his time carefully, and then rattle off as many targets as possible in quick succession, using each previous shot as a sighter. Here's a picture of the winning card from the recent Pyramid Air Cup that I attended. Notice how the sighters are peppered with holes. In 100-yard competitions, the shooter will typically take about 5 to 10 minutes shooting only his sighters to better understand what different wind gusts and lulls do to the pellet before he takes a single shot for points. Some shooters may even tune their rifles during the shoot to see what speed is best suited to the conditions at that specific time. For example, in very turbulent conditions, it might actually be better if you tune your rifle down so that the pellet remains stable. Although the number of scoreable targets is the same across the disciplines, a 100-yard shooter will typically take 3 or 4 times as many shots in total, and for this reason, the equipment looks very different as well. 25-meter shooters will typically need less than 40 shots for a card, and that's in 177, so there's no need for huge air capacity. At 100 though, most of the top shooters will opt for anything between 480cc and 1.2 litres of air capacity on their rifles, and high capacity magazines as well. I keep more than 100 shots loaded up in magazines at any given time, and this gives me the freedom to shoot quickly without worrying about refilling. Another big difference is that 25-meter shooters tend to use adjustable front rests, while 100-yard shooters tend to opt to shoot off a bar pod and sandbags. Many have tried to shoot off front rests in 100-yard competitions, but end up switching to a bar pod and sandbag simply because you can move between sighters and targets much faster. You may lose a bit of stability by using bar pod and sandbags, but what you gain in the ability to move quickly is worth a lot more. If you take 1 second too long between shots, the wind can push that pellet 10 centimeters off. 25 meter shooters tend to take more time between shots, so a front rest is more suitable. The last difference I noticed is that the margins at 25 meters are much smaller. Shooters are required to shoot in the high 240s to even stand a chance of placing at the top, while at 100 yards, a good score on an average day is normally mid 220s, and on a rough day, anything in the 210s can win it. The guns are capable of shooting perfect 250 scores. The top 100-yard guns typically shoot half MOA groups, but the difference is that the wind has so much of an effect at 100 and is so difficult to read that 250 scores have never been shot. In fact, I don't even think a 240 has ever been shot. Maybe one day. As for similarities, well, for one, the concept behind barrel and projectile choice is the same. Magnus forces can push a spinning pellet up or down depending on the wind direction, so typically shooters still want to use the slowest possible twist rate and smoothest possible barrel profile to keep vertical deflection to a minimum. Of course, this will look different for each discipline. 177s require a much faster twist than a 25 or 30, so while you'll see plenty of 1 in 40 twist barrels at 100-yard competitions, anything over 1 in 20 would be considered very slow for 25 meters. It is very interesting though to see how shooters in both disciplines use the same theories and the same understanding of physics in different ways to achieve the same outcome. The last similarity I'll mention is the mental aspect. In both disciplines you need to be incredibly strong mentally to focus and to not let fear overtake you and to allow your subconscious to make decisions for you without overthinking what you're doing. In this regard, I think that anyone who is good at one discipline can probably become very good at the other with a bit of practice and the right equipment. The best part I think is that we can all learn from each other. I've learned a heck of a lot from these guys, especially in the small details like how a Thomas rifle works so well and how the probing system improves precision. I'm a real nerd, so I think I could learn to enjoy 25 meter a lot. Each shooter shot 3 cards of LV and 3 cards of HV. Each card was filmed live and broadcast in real time all over the world, which was awesome. And at the end, these scores were tallied up to crown winners in each category and an overall 2-gun champion. In LV, 16-year-old South African girl Robin Crabb took first place, shooting like an absolute boss in rough conditions and showing the guys how to stay mentally strong. Pino Leone from Italy took second, and Willem van der Linde from my home province of the Eastern Cape took third. Special mention to Hein Vrooman in fourth, who shot a 250, something I thought was almost impossible at sub 12 foot-pound in those conditions. In heavy varmint, it was an all South African top 4, with Carl van der Linde, also from my home province, in first, with what was apparently a new world record of 747, which is insane. Kevin du Toit second, and Hein Vrooman third. Kevin actually shot 2 perfect 250s, and could have been higher if it wasn't for the one card. That just shows how tight the margins are. Oh, and that's the owner of Ataman in 5th place, Alexei Soldatov, in case you were interested. For the 2-gun, which is the total of the 2 disciplines combined, it was again South Africa dominating, with the Finns also doing particularly well. Hein Vrooman took number 1. Hein is probably the most knowledgeable shooter I've ever met in terms of the technical aspects of the gun, and after talking to him for a few months before the competition, I'll be honest, I kind of expected him to win. He's just that good. On the Rimfire side, International Sporter Division was dominated by the Europeans, with quite a few Finns, Brits and Italians at the top. Rimfire LV was taken by 2 South Africans, and Rimfire HV by 2 Italians and an Aussie. A nice mixed bag of results. I'll be honest, I'm pretty bummed that I couldn't stay for the entire duration of the competition. I would have loved to see it through, and would have loved even more to have taken part, even if I were to come dead last. Next time though, I'll work my butt off and see if I can somehow make it in. And maybe I'll even persuade some of these guys to head over to the 100-yard competitions in the States. As always guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.